This is the Speak USA podcast. I'm your host, Cliff Zincroft. Let's learn about our democracy and how we can all take action to protect it and make it stronger. I want to welcome Diana Loya to the Speak USA podcast. Diana, welcome. So glad you're
Thank
able to
you.
join us. Where,
Yes, thank you for
where,
having me.
where are you coming in from in our remote
From
session?
Dumas, Texas.
You are in Dumas. Okay, you know what story I didn't tell you beforehand?
Okay.
I forgot to talk about this, but my wife and I, when we were coming back from our honeymoon, this is a very long time ago. It was in January. We were driving home, and there was a snowstorm. We said we were in Dumas. We said we're going to try to get to Amarillo. We got halfway to Amarillo, turned around, went back to Dumas, and spent the night in Dumas, Texas.
Oh my. I was going to say, most people say if you blink, you miss it.
We did not miss it. Not,
We are
not at
known for
all.
those snowstorms, blizzards, everything.
I can imagine. And so that was a very long time ago for us. I can't say that I've been to Dumas lately, but I have in fact been to Dumas, Texas, and good to know that you live there. Now, so I think Amarillo is the closest.
Amarillo is the closest bigger city or access to many other
Yeah,
things.
and I imagine in some of the topics we're going to talk about, we may talk about what we would have to go to Amarillo for. Well, in any case, welcome again, Diana. I'm so glad you're here. I want to give you an opportunity to share your background with us. You're an educator, you're a candidate in Texas House District 87. And there's a lot more in your background, your education, you have a military connection, you're a mom and an educator. Take it away from there.
All of these things, right? I feel like that's the normal story for women here in the Panhandle and in Texas. I came to the United States when I was about kindergarten, first grade. My mom divorced my dad and decided to join the family over. I was born in Mexico, in Chihuahua. So I went to kindergarten there, went to El Paso for a year, and then my mom decided to kind of move up here to Dumas at the time where the majority of her siblings were. Just trying to find something better for us. I went through education through our public school, and that's where I've worked the last 20 years at the same public school that I attended, where I learned how to speak English. I graduated from here, played sports here, met my husband here, and decided this was home. Um, so I've been here the last 20 years working in the same public schools that raised me basically. I have three children. I have one in college. Funny story. She wanted to be a lawyer. Then once she knew about the poli-sci major, she ended up deciding this is what I want to do, especially kind of taking after mom and dad with our crazy ideas, right? I have a junior in high school and I have an 11-year-old in intermediate school. So one girl, the oldest, and two boys.
Yeah, I have three kids as well. So one of my favorite sayings, kind of cliche for some people, but you have to go to a zone defense when you go from two to three kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. They say one to two is a big jump. I say two to three. I think if you have three, I think you can have many more after that, right? And I really wish we would have. I think just at the time, we thought three is a good number.
Three is definitely a good number, no question about it. You said you played sports.
Yes, sir. I played just like when you think about small town communities, I know it doesn't happen a lot in bigger cities where they kind of specialize in one sport. That is kind of I would say part of the heart of our small town rural area schools are the sports and the actual school itself. So you really have the majority of children that will at least try a sport. So I played basketball, ran track. Obviously, nothing major, nothing like what my husband, where he made it to state but it was just I had a great experience, especially a girl from coming from Mexico that was an emergent bilingual learner and getting to experience those things. So.
Yeah. So you learn, obviously you've lived here 20 years, so I would not know that you're not a native English speaker.
I get that quite a bit. Now, there are still some things, and I think this is very true for emergent bilingual. Anybody that's learning a second language or learns a second language, you still have some, especially when we think about how long it takes to learn a language. I came to the United States being a great decoder, so I knew how to read coming in, but it takes probably twice as long for an emergent bilingual learner of any language to get a vocabulary down to equivalent to a native speaker. So there's still some things that I say that.
And I've traveled a lot in my job outside the U.S. and been in places where Spanish is spoken. And a few times I speak just a little bit of Spanish. And a few times where my host abandoned me and left me speaking to non-English speakers. It was a really good experience for me because it helped me understand the mental challenge, that you're trying to either explain something or understand something fairly complicated. And then you're having to layer on top of that this translation. I had one attempt to deliver an entire presentation in Spanish. And I
Oh,
like to talk about how I was like an airplane losing altitude, sort of at 10-minute point, I was maybe okay. In 20 minutes, not so much. In about 30 minutes, I called for a volunteer out the
oh.
to come bail me out because it was not okay. It was a great group. They tolerate me. So good for them, I suppose. Expand on your military connection, if you would, and your husband who made state. I really would like to know what he made state in.
Oh, and wrestling. We are a huge wrestling family. So all of our kids, fun fact, our daughter is the first female wrestler in Dumas. Well, she opened up the program here in Dumas. We didn't have a girls wrestling program. She was one of the ones to start, and she's one of the first girls she wrestled at the collegiate level. So she was able to do that. But yes, wrestling is huge in our family. I think it has brought us together, our community together, just like any other sports, football and everything else, right? But my husband wrestled in high school and he was a state placer, made it to state, it's really neat. I always post pictures where they have like outstanding wrestlers, or we have this shirt called Dynasty shirt here in Dumas, and it is so neat to see. We have so everybody that's made it to state, their names placed on there. So we have my husband, my daughter, now my son. So
Oh, wow.
it's just so that's part of that small town charm, right? That you have getting to see these things happen at school and in our sports. So um,
So you have lived in Dumas a long time. Yeah.
my whole entire life, basically. So I lived in El Paso for a year when we moved from Mexico, and then we moved here to Dumas and have been here my whole entire life.
Well, very, very cool. And that military connection, your husband served. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes. So I met my husband. Funny story. It's a small town, so I knew who he was, but we really did not know each other. We just kind of would see each other, but I had really no connection with him. When he came back from boot camp, he graduated in 2002, joined the Marines automatically, and we know what kind of happened right after, that 2002, time. Joined the Marines, came home from boot camp and was here for 2 weeks because they literally got their orders to deploy to Iraq as soon as they got out of boot camp. So I met him a week before he deployed. and we decided to date throughout through his deployment. So it's everybody always says was that was a crazy choice, but I tell them it's been 20 years of a
Well, it's passed the
21
test of
years of
time. That's for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
So I got to be a girlfriend his first deployment, and that was the hardest because at that time we were still it's funny to think about now, the lost like letter writing letters. Well, that was the only way we could communicate. So we still have the letters that we would send to each other, and they were about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, the time frame when they would when he would receive it and then he would send it back, he would write me back. It was so we that was our way of communicating.
My dad was he was significantly older than me. He was serving, but he was in World War II, served in Third Army in General Patton's headquarters. When my mom passed away, I found my dad's footlocker in the attic. I found letters he wrote home to his mom and to his family. When you mentioned the lost art of letter writing, I literally have those letters that my dad
And they are so
when
special.
he was deployed. Yeah. I yeah, it was really cool to see. Um, just to think about what that would have been like to write the letter, to read the letter. That would have been
And to know
something.
that they wouldn't, yeah, to know you wouldn't receive it right away, to know, it's just thinking of the idea. He turned 19 on the day that we crossed over to Iraq. He was one of the front lines to cross over, and it was his birthday, March 19th. So,
I've not served, so I wouldn't even begin to feel like I could understand what that would be like, or your position, which was
yes,
being, I guess, first girlfriend and then wife. I think that sounded like
yes,
where you were headed. Uh,
yes,
and so what? So you're in Dumas. I'm in San Antonio. San Antonio, military city, USA, military bases everywhere. This idea of the service that is provided by the spouses of those who are serving is not unusual here. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what that was like to be, to have a significant other or a husband who is serving and you're in the home front.
yes. So, his our experience with that was a little bit different because them being so far away, there used to be a unit. He was a reservist. So there used to be a unit in Amarillo. So that was still 40-minute drive, right? But usually when you have a reservist, you don't have a spouse that can go with you to a to stay in on base, right? And most families, when they get deployed, some choose to come home. Well, we didn't have that. There was no base here, so that was a little different for us. Having now, we were lucky to have the reservist center in Amarillo. At the time, it's closed now, but we didn't have access to that. For example, during his deployment, we had the insurance that's attached to that, which is TRICARE. Um, I ended up having to pay out of pocket because there were no service providers. Us being so rural, they did not take TRICARE. You had maybe one doctor, no specialist, and that's in Amarillo, which is a bigger that you have more doctors.
And for those who might not know, TRICARE is
It's the military's health insurance, which is wonderful. In any bigger city, that would have been great. Or on base, it would have been great if, as a family, we would have been, on base for that. But I remember our daughter had her during the second deployment. We had our baby. We had my husband missed our daughter's first year of he was deployed the second time when she turned a year, so he missed a lot of the time that where she learned how to walk and her first words. And so she already had an established pediatrician. We ended up having to pay out of pocket to keep that because there were no service providers in our area.
Well, I know that's some time ago for you, but I'm still going to say thank you for being a military spouse who holds down the home. That's just so important. Tell us a little bit too. I think you kind of touched on mom a little bit already, but maybe not so much educator. You are an educator every
Yes,
day.
I have. Yes, every day. I have done it all. I have lived it all. I have been in education. This will be my 20th year as an educator. I was actually a nursing major when I first went to college. After, meeting my husband, went through college and I was a nursing major. The second deployment, I was about a year off of finishing nursing school. That second deployment made me realize if something happened to my husband, I could not afford to be gone 3 nights out of the week and not be with our daughter. So that was a hard decision because I really liked nursing. I was good. It would have been good, but it was a decision that I feel like I made for our family. And it wasn't a sacrifice because I love being an educator. I think I was an educator, a born educator. So I made that switch to teaching and being bilingual, of course. That was just the path that God had intended for me. So I started off as a bilingual kindergarten teacher. Absolutely loved it. After that, I feel like I've been in my position like every 5 years. I feel like I've been kind of, on to the next. How can we help more children? Then I became a reading interventionist, which that was probably my heart when I became a reading recovery teacher at the time. Um, I did that for about 3 years, then became an instructional coach, helping our whole school on the reading side. Then the HB3 bill comes in, and it was where the Texas Reading Academies, we had 3 years to train every elementary teacher to be a master reading teacher.
That's
Well, they
Texas HB3.
HB3, yes, sir.
Yeah,
So I ended up applying for that TEA. I ended up being not only the ELAR, the English Language Arts cohort leader for a district, I was the biliteracy. I went ahead and did my test as well to have our biliteracy. So I was a biliteracy academies cohort
understood.
leader as
And
well.
your district is Dumas ISD, is that right?
Yes, sir. Dumas ISD.
Okay, I was just guessing. Wasn't sure.
Yes.
Glad I got that right. So
Yes.
you're at the district level now,
I
and
am now.
what's your current job responsibilities?
Well, I like to say I'm probably a jack of all trades and a master of none, but basically it's wherever the need is. I am my actual position is an curriculum coordinator and emergent bilingual district instructional coach. But so definitely anything that has to do with curriculum, especially our new curriculum that was put in blue bonnet, had our hand in that. I like to say, if I could best describe my title, is I'm a trenches girl. I am in those classrooms helping principals, helping wherever our district needs me. Right now, I am currently at one of our elementaries who unfortunately had an F rating. So we are under school improvement. So I have been this year, that has been my focus is to help that elementary out.
And that's an urgent issue for a school district. That I know if that happens too many times in a row, you wind up getting a lot more coming in.
Yes.
Yeah, as it were. Sometimes help is in quotes, really. It's not necessarily the help that you
Yes.
need. Well, and another thank you to you for doing that work. Is
Thank
so
you.
so important to do. And I was going to ask you, instructional coach. It is the other district employees who it's not the students. You're not coaching the students directly necessarily, but
No, it's
primarily teachers, or is it both?
teachers. Yes, sir. It's primarily teachers. So it deals with doing observations and co-teaching sometimes modeling for the teacher. But it's a wonderful job.
Well, that's the same way we talk about, it's a good way to teach students to show them how to do it, model it, watch them and give them notes as it were. Is also a good way to do that. Let's shift gears to the fact that you are running for Texas House District 87, and you're in a party that I'm just going to guess is not necessarily dominant in your area of the state. I'm going to pull four words out of your campaigns: schools, workforce, healthcare, and way of life. And I'm going to mix into that you're a Democrat in the Panhandle. Jump in. I mean, I want to know why. So what about it? Why did you run? Maybe that is the first question. And then after that, just jump in any of those places you take it away.
Right. It seems like and I always tell people, probably thinking, what were you thinking? I kind of have to back up into the story of how I even knew about a state representative. So we have only had 4 or 5 state representatives. One of the most known ones has been David Swinford, and which we got to meet. His daughter worked as a teacher for a school district, and he was from Dumas. That's as far as I knew, as far as what a state representative was, or who even our state representative was, right? So didn't really care. When you think about these small areas, these rural towns, it is crazy to me because I was that person. You don't really focus on the smaller campaigns and smaller, people that are representing us. You're just thinking about voting, what president are we voting for? And that's about it, right? And then, even then, in thinking of Republican or Democrat, just because this area is majority Republican, you automatically think, well, I guess I must be Republican. So that's about the way that I was up until the second time Trump was elected, where it was, this is what I must be. I know nothing about it, but we're thinking about, these elections. That's kind of where my background was on that. Now, what kind of changed the trajectory of me running on the Democrat side, and just how all of that came about? My husband spoke for veterans. He's done that at the Capitol a couple of times, so he's a big advocate for that. Bernie Sanders was here a while back, and my husband spoke for them, or spoke for that event. And they reached out to him.
So Bernie Sanders, I want to make sure I understand what you just said. Bernie Sanders came to
Amarillo.
Amarillo, okay.
It was the oligarchy tour. And my husband was one of the speakers, and he just did an amazing job. And, in his mind, it was just thinking about veterans and just so many things that that were in his heart. Well, they ended up reaching out to him and saying, like, you did an amazing job. You've advocated for veterans. Have you ever thought about running? So he agreed, and he ran for land commissioner this term. He ran for land commissioner of Texas.
The statewide.
The statewide. Yes.
Office. Okay.
Yes, sir. So during the time that they were filming his video, his campaign video, I was in conversation with the campaign managers, and just a simple conversation. And, the talk was about how great it was that we were having these people like Tellerico, like my husband, just normal people, not politicians, people that really want to see change, how we were having so many join. And they brought up, hey, there's nobody that on the Republican side, she pretty much ran uncontested. There's nobody running against her. It's a given. there's nobody on the Democratic side to step up. Would you want to do something like that? And first of all, I had no idea what HD 87 was. I had no idea what a state representative did. I just knew what my husband was running for, and that was it. So I told him no. I said, first of all, I'm a little old girl from Mexico that was an EB student, became an educator, simple mom, veteran wife. Like, there's nothing that I can give to this, whatever you think that I can do. So they told me, give it 2 weeks and let us know what you think in 2 weeks, because we think who you represent is, HB, or sorry, House District 87. So 2 weeks is what they gave me. I made the mistake of
Oh, no.
looking into it. I looked up who our representative was. What did a state representative do? What had, had been the great things that have happened in our House district? How did it impact education? The impact on education that our representative had. I started doing a deep dive, and I think it was an easy decision after that. I knew I had to.
I'm doing this podcast because I knew I had to do it. Watching just what's going on around me. I have a nice way. I like to say this. I think it's a nice way. What's going on in our state? What's going on in our country? I didn't want to be somebody who didn't stand up and speak for things that I see that are happening that are wrong. And then the fact that there's a better way. It's not just that they're wrong, but there's a better way to approach this. So,
And I live by one of the mottos that I have. If not, I always say, if not you, then who? And that just resonated to me. I needed to walk the walk if I was going to talk the talk. But it's true. And on the Democratic side, this is what's, I think, different in our area. When you're thinking about a statewide or even a country, it is so very left versus right. When we're thinking about the Panhandle, when we're thinking about these small areas, I'm not representing a side. I'm representing the people of the Panhandle, because in this left versus right power struggle that we have, we're forgetting about about our small towns. We're forgetting about the people. We're the forgotten people. So that's a part. Now, the Democratic, my husband was running as a Democrat. I did not know this. My dad has been a Democrat his whole life. Why I thought I was a Republican? It's that left versus right. But if you think about it, I see a lot of myself on the Democratic side in the views of what is believed. But there are some conservative things that so I just think that we've gone too far left versus right, instead of just thinking either voting for a person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, maybe I could come at this from two different ways. One is, the way I feel about things, it's not about left versus right, but right versus wrong. I don't care where I see lots of let's see, I'm trying to figure out how not to say the word lies, but that's the word I'm thinking. So maybe I'll just say it. When I see things like that, or I see unethical behavior, I don't care where it comes from. It needs to be correct. It needs to be corrected. And I think that's one of the things that bothers me most deeply is there are so many things that have happened at the national state level that are just violations of law and ethics, that there's no accountability. There has not been accountability. The party that could have chosen to clean itself up did. And there's so many examples of that. And, but then maybe the other way to look at this is that there are issues that, if we get away from the left versus right differences, are in everyone's best interest. And the one I think about is workforce development. Immediately, that involves education. You're not going to have a workforce if you don't educate the next generation. All the way from K through college or whatever post-secondary education student student and family, chooses and can afford and can arrange for. And, another one to me is free enterprise and, the right of somebody who works hard and does it right to be rewarded for that.
Absolutely.
That's a good thing, and they should be rewarded, and then they should pay some taxes.
Yes,
On
those are
the.
nonpartisan issues, right?
Yeah. Well, they can be. They
Yeah, they
can be
should be.
nonpartisan
Yeah,
until
we all
politicians take
want.
them and use them as wedges.
Absolutely. Yes, I think ultimately, especially here in the Panhandle, we want a better life. We want better access to healthcare, affordability. We all want that. We just need to look past the you're extremely right or you're extremely left and really start looking at what is needed in the Panhandle. What are we not receiving in the Panhandle?
And that is, that's your job, right? As a candidate and as a representative, your job is to represent the people that elected you. So no doubt. Hey, those topics I brought up: schools, workforce, healthcare, way of life. You want to pick one and go a little deeper?
I think we can start, I think just leaning into it from what we talked about on the veteran side with healthcare. I know that's very specific to our area. When we talk about healthcare, we're in a different scenario, as you mentioned. For you, having access to a specialist, it's at your fingertips. And most people in Texas that live in these bigger cities, that is that is not an issue. In our rural areas, not only do we struggle with um, we have a hospital, for example, here in Dumas, and it's an amazing hospital. Um, but as far as specialty and having the specialist available to you, that's a 40-minute drive. And that's just on some. There are times where we have to drive 3 hours to Lubbock or all the way to Dallas, which is a 5 to 6 hour, to receive proper specialized care. So when you think about that and you think about the funding that is needed in the Panhandle, it is absolutely needed. You have to look at our rural areas with a different lens than you would in our bigger cities. And I think we have not had any major legislation in thinking about that. I think it's seen as a whole in Texas. We know, of course, the shortage of keep being able to keep doctors and nurses in these rural areas, these smaller towns where they can't afford to pay them, what they could make in a bigger city. As far as healthcare, just access to healthcare and making sure we have enough funding and legislation to help not just healthcare overall, but looking at the Panhandle and having accessibility. I think my main thing with healthcare is access.
Let's talk about schools then, just a little bit. And you have this really, pretty, well, I'm going to call it meaningful, to use the word meaningful, but meaningful change from within in schools.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, yes.
Go ahead. Go.
I will tell you that was one of my main reasons for saying I am going to run. Because we have somebody making decisions for us that never attended public school. And yet we're making decisions for not only our public education, but for our rural area. Thinking of like, oh, well, teachers told me. I've lived it. I'm in the trenches with the teachers on the daily. It was even just not even thinking about vouchers. Of course, that just was the topper within that. But as far as education and in thinking of that, I knew I just couldn't sit back and at least not try to fight for us. Just like I did. I ended up in 2021. I ended up finishing my master's degree in educational leadership because I knew I needed to do more for our district. That's when I started moving to the district level. And I knew I wanted to do more. I knew I needed to do more, especially for our emergent bilingual population. So this was kind of in the same scenario when thinking about that, not just the voucher scheme that is going on, You know, there was just so much. When I looked at the PSF, which is the basic allotment for children, for our schools, for our public schools, it hasn't been raised since 2019.
Yeah.
When I looked at that, and we keep putting the blame on our public schools and our teachers, and there's just so much blame, and I've seen it because I've lived it. I'm in the trenches with them, seeing how we don't have enough funding, and it's a trickle down as well. So if you think even in the bigger cities there's not enough funding, what does that look like for our rural areas?
Something I don't understand. And, it's one of those things I'm not real happy with, honestly, is for years, our governor said effectively, give me vouchers and then I'll provide more funding to public schools, play the role that a governor plays in doing that. So that went on for several years. There were no additional funds, even for inflation, that were going to schools. And then vouchers passed. And if anything, the schools got thrown a bone in terms of additional funding. And I don't even think it's that, because I know a very large local district that is absorbing a 10% cut this year.
Yep.
What is going on? And I guess my feeling, and I'm going to say, how is it not obvious? Maybe that's a little presumptuous of me, but how is it not obvious that an educated population is good for us, including our economy? Texas is so proud of our economic standing. We need educated people to fulfill that economy.
So, as far as that goes, with the vouchers, like you were mentioning, throwing a bone. Well, we had TIA, the incentive allotment that passed, right? That is given to certain teachers. The process, if you knew the process to get for the state to approve it, it's lengthy and it's hard. So not only do you have that, and that was like this great thing, in theory, it's great. But why are we having to do that instead of having put that money and straight just give it to our public schools? Instead of it, you have to earn it, right? We had some funding, which I like to call it crumbs. Those were crumbs sent out. It's like, we have this voucher system, but look, we gave you a little bit of a raise. I think it ended up being like an $8,000 raise a year.
Yeah, my version of throwing a bone, that is you crumbs. Maybe I'll say that from now.
Yeah. Well, when you think about that, and I just kept thinking, once I started looking more into it and having that $1 billion just sitting there, we need to fully fund schools. These little, like you said, these bones, these crumbs that they're throwing, you're trying to cover up a major problem with a small little Band-Aid. And telling people, be happy with that. Okay. You've got a raise, be happy with that. And then making the state making TEA believe that it's their fault, which is the part that I'm like, why are we not standing up against that? Because it's true. I heard this from my bosses and stuff where they were saying, listen, we can't do anything about that. That's already set for the next 2 years. And that's where I told them, you might not, TEA might not, but I can. People that run can change that in legislation. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to run. We're living on, let's just make do with what we have. And we are working on skeleton crews in our public schools. I have 19-year-old teachers that we are training. It is not fair to them. They are going to school, to college, as well as educating our kids. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to us. And we can't pay them what we need to pay them. We can't keep teachers because we can't pay them enough.
And it's not good for your community, for the state, or for the country in the long term. Anyway, well, I guess we could go on and on with this one, but let me take us on and on with it in one more way before we leave. Vouchers. we kind of brought that up. We didn't really talk about it. It's controversial. How, how does the House District 87 people, residents, how do they feel about vouchers? How do you
So
feel?
you have kind of a mixture, right? And it's a funny situation that happens when you start getting into conversation because you have different things that have come up. One, obviously, the ones that are completely against it. I will tell you, we have here in Dumas, there are no private schools, no charter schools. And we do have some, but they are pre-K, K. But no, so if any of our kids want to go to private school, we're going to have to drive them to Amarillo.
So they could drive 40 minutes to Amarillo.
40 minutes to Amarillo if you want to do that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and then well, let's think that through because what does a parent do? Drive them 40 minutes and then drive back for 40 minutes and then try to work and then drive back for 40 minutes and then drive back. I mean, let's see, what is that? 40, 80, gosh, I should be able to do math here. That's 160 minutes. That's 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Out of your life.
Out of your life.
Now,
Every
some
day, every
choose
school
to
day,
every school day. Now you choose to relocate. That's different. But when we think about accessibility, we don't have that. We don't have that here. This is just talking. Dumas is closer to Amarillo. When you start talking about some of our other areas in HD 87, that's even worse. It could be a potential 2 hour to get to a private school. So you have that.
I think this is my cue, by the way, to hold this picture.
Right,
I meant to do this
absolutely.
earlier, so everybody, what we're looking at here is the section of Texas that is House District 87. And we were, Diana, you and I were joking that that's probably larger than Rhode Island, larger than Connecticut, larger than Massachusetts. I don't know that for sure. I should probably be careful what I'm saying, but the point is made.
Close, right? Yes, pretty close. About eight counties, 22-ish cities, but they all are about up to 30, 40 an hour away from each other as far as distance. But so the accessibility to private schools is completely, it's not available here. Now, the people that say that it's not going to affect us, well, it is because that funding should have been put into public education. Another thing that I always get from parents is thinking of, well, our taxes should follow our students, right? And that means if I choose to have my child in private school, then my taxes should follow that. And I think we forget the reason why we have public education to begin with. And it not only is it to even the playing field, to have equitable access to education, which we know is needed in order for us to succeed as a country. But also education is a basic good. So when you think about firemen, for example, we can't say, well, I choose not to pay my taxes to pay for firemen because I've never had a fire. So it's again just
or I live in a small house, or my house is made out of brick, not wood. I don't.
exactly right. So when we think about education in that way, it should not, because public education is a basic good.
Well, if you think about education that way, then people who don't have children should not have to pay taxes for school districts.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, enough said.
So that is, I think they twisted it. When they brought in these vouchers, they twisted it to say it's giving parent choice. We've always had choice. We have always had a choice to send our kids to either private school, to a charter school, to homeschool, or to take them to public education. That choice has never been taken away. And of course, now we're seeing the data. I'm waiting for the rest of the data to come in. So far, we know that 75%, if not more, we're already in private schools. We're already paying for that. So I'm waiting to see how many of our, because we're taking money away from our most underserved population.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up earlier when we were talking about funding for schools. To the extent that maybe even crumbs were thrown, those crumbs then escape the school when the school's enrollment goes down by 5% or 10%. And because the districts are reimbursed per student.
Per student.
So, right. And so when you really take the whole formula and you add it up, it's even worse. It's awful.
Yes, because you think that PSF, which we know hasn't been raised since 2019, per student, that per student funding, they say, well, vouchers are really not going to affect us much because we're in a rural area. It is that funding should have, first of all, we need to have raised that PSF a long time ago. It needs to be done every single year. It's been very minute. It's not considerable enough, thinking about inflation and everything else that has happened. But that should have gone, it should have never gone to private schools. And I think we're not going to see it maybe this year, but I guarantee you starting next year with this whole entire situation, we are going to start seeing it and somebody else will be blamed. We're probably still blame TEA and still blame our public schools not doing good enough. And I think that's the part that upsets me the most because I see day to day that 19-year-old, these teachers that have to have two jobs. They leave. I literally can name to you the teachers right now that we have that are having to work two jobs just to make ends meet. And this is in a rural town. And that's what upset me the most. They are blaming our public educators and that our system is so, it's not well. When we have the best educators, especially here in the Panhandle, when you have these educators here that are staying and choosing to teach, it's because they love our children.
And, this isn't true for all politicians with whom I would have a policy disagreement, but it is true for a few too many. Take that funding away, take the capacity, and then blame those you took the capacity away from for not doing their job, and then that becomes a vicious cycle. It just goes round and round and gets worse. And at some point, someone like you dies.
Well, hopefully, because it really does fire. I mean, I can talk about this over and over, how they're pinning us against. I feel like we have to, as educators, we have to prove ourselves constantly, working on a skeleton crew and with very little resources. And they want us to do the very best with the very little resources instead of, let me give you the resources that we should be giving you. And then we need to see progress after this.
And let's find out. So your issue is rural school. Operating a rural school district. I'm in what I like to call the land of 17 ISDs. San Antonio, there are literally 17 independent school districts in San Antonio. It's not. I mean, there is a San Antonio ISD, but then there are 16 more. It's not like I think Houston is pretty much one ISD, and I know LA is. And there was a study done by a local college professor, Trinity University professor, Christine Dren. I like to talk about this on the show. People, here he goes again. But anyway, she did a study of those boundaries of those ISDs. And they, if you take a map of financial and housing redlining from the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and you lay it on top of the ISD maps, they sure look old. And I see these schools that are so resource poor and struggling with many of these saying, it's the urban version, not the rural version. But other than that, it's really the same issues that you're seeing. And we're not doing the right thing. You talked about your mantra, kind of mine is to try to do the right thing. We're not doing the right thing by these students, and we're not doing the right thing for our community, state, and nation either, in not being as competitive as we could be.
Absolutely. And that our last meeting that we had statewide, as far as with educators, it was, we're trying to be the best. We're 40 something and Texas is 40 something in the country, and we are trying to be the best. And TAs doing the best that they can with what is given to them. Our public schools are doing the best that we can. It's time for whoever is in office, they need to do their part. And it's time for the legislation to do something for us.
Time for elected officials to do that.
Absolutely.
And let's make that you.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make
We
that
are
you.
doing everything we can for that. Absolutely.
Well, let's see what do we have left to talk about. We talked about healthcare a lot. We're going to save that for later, but I don't think we did. Certainly, you feel free to add to that. We've not really talked about immigration, and you come at this with a very specific, very particular background perspective.
Absolutely. And I think it's hard to speak on that, and not think that I'm going to be biased because I am an immigrant myself. I came to the country legally, but I stayed after our I guess I think it's like a permission. They give you a permission to stay, and we ended up staying. I know what it's like to have that fear, especially being a child, having that understanding of not just the fact that you'll be sent home. And I think this is the part where for some immigrants, it's a fear because a lot of our immigrant families, they migrate here because it is the violence and not being able to eat is very real. Some of us, I love my country where I was born. That's always a part of your heart. But so I don't know that it's a fear of that. But when you think about what could happen for a child like Liam, to be placed in that kind of situation where not only are you taking in this cop car, you are grabbed and taken, and you're taken to this facility, and thinking of the trauma that is placed upon our children, and now having these people speak on it as of, well, it's their fault. If the parents would have done the right thing, it really kind of, it's that they call themselves Christian, and that is not a Christian thing to do, regardless, right? Thinking of humanity. Now, so I lived that, like I said, we were lucky enough. My mom remarried a couple of years after she came to the U.S., and that's who I call my dad. He was born here in the country. So we did the process, the expensive process of becoming a resident. And then later on, I took it upon myself to become a citizen. And I did that as an adult. I became a citizen as an adult. But going through a process.
So you have been to a naturalization ceremony.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. On that, what an amazing ceremony to have lived through.
Yes. Learning about the process of it just really opens your eyes, but it opens your eyes to more than just saying, well, they should have done it the right way. Right? Having that conversation, when you actually sit down with people that have gone through the process, we have people that have been in the process for 20 years, and it's still so. Some of us are lucky enough to have gone through the process. So I think as far as immigration goes, I, regardless, I think of whatever party you are, I think we all are in agreement of our children, to me, are the most important. And if I'm fighting for them in our public schools in the way that I am in immigration, to see a child now, I even have perspective on this. Whenever I was working as an assistant at the school that I'm working at now, we had a major raid in the town that I was at. We stayed with our children that day till 10 o'clock at night because the parents had been taken. Some of the kids did not have anybody to go home to that night.
It's
So
heartbreaking.
seeing this, the process to me is wrong, especially right now with everything that has happened. I am appalled by everything that has happened, not only with Liam, but everything else that has happened in our state. But even seeing it, I've seen it firsthand, not only with it happening to me and having to go through the process, but the things that I have seen. Right now, I have some second graders with their curriculum. Some of our second graders learned about immigration and the whole process of that through our curriculum. And they got to write a letter, and I actually have those letters, and they got to write a letter about the reason why they immigrated to the US. And the writing that you have from second graders explaining the situation.
Spectacular.
It
There's
is.
there's a sacred text that talks about how we treat the widow, the orphan, and the alien. And I think about that a lot when this topic of immigration comes up. The way that we are treating, the way that term alien is used, somebody from another country and context, is appalled, is pretty accurate for the way I feel about it as well. And and we're creating orphans, or at least temporarily. We're creating temporary orphans along the way of doing this. And it's used the word heartbreaking before, but I think that's pretty accurate.
And
There's a contrast there. The case of Liam, and the things that he went through when he was released and flew home. Well, two things happened. One, just the amazing letter that Representative Joaquin Castro, wrote to Liam. I don't know if you saw that letter that was sent to you. Suggest you read it. It's heartbreaking yet again to see that. And Representative Castro asking Liam, "Don't remember us for the detention experience. Remember those of us who came behind." And then the pilot of the plane took him in the car.
yes.
And I just thought to myself, if this young man becomes a pilot, it's going to be despite what our country did to detain him.
Exactly.
And because of that pilot who gave him a special experience, that is who we ought to be as a country, not that other thing.
So I think the process of it, I understand we have to have, I agree with Tallarico when he says our borders should be like our front porch, with the lights on, but a key on the door. I do agree with that. And of course we have to have law, and I understand all of these things. And I'm not against it. I think we need to have better reform. I definitely think our borders can be more secure, not only for on the U.S. side, but even the people that die trying to cross for a better life. So just in general, thinking of just humanity, not just I'm only thinking about the U.S., I'm only thinking about Mexico, or I'm only thinking just of the fact of thinking about humanity. Those two things, a reform for a better process for becoming a citizen here and being able to be to receive health care. I know there's a huge, they're using all of our health care and they can't deny. There's a family right now that we have, three families actually, but one family that I know for a fact, they are being deported. They have given him a certain time. He needed life-saving surgery and was denied at the majority of hospitals. So when people talk about, oh, they don't deny them health care, I have a proof here where they are.
Better. Yeah.
And these people just want to get home. They just want to go back home. They want to go home in their own, by their own accord, instead of being sent to a detention center. And that's what you are seeing from people, that have traveled here, that want a better life. They're willing to sacrifice so much. So we definitely need better reform for immigration.
I think about what I would do, what I hope I would do if I were a parent or, dealing with violence or dealing with, dealing with poverty with my kids. I wonder what I would do in that scenario. So many times it's not what you do, but how you do it. Laws, you can't just throw the borders open. That would be a recipe for disaster. And a lot of other ways that, the point you made, would be bad, would be good for no one. Bad for everyone, good for no one. But sometimes how you do it is what matters. Boy, the way we're doing it right now sure seems, use the
Exactly.
word, inhumane.
I agree.
Well, we are coming in for a landing here. Certainly, if there's any topics that you wanted to cover, this would be a good moment for you to cover those. I'm going to read a quote off of your campaigns that I just learned. With it. I'm a product of hard work, perseverance, and belief that service to others is one of the highest callings. Why that quote, Diane?
When I think about it's not just for myself. To me, this isn't a quote that just represents myself. It represents my mom, my dad, my husband. It represents the people of the Panhandle. That quote is a representation of who I am trying to be a representative for. It's our schools, our areas, our rural towns, our people that not were born here and have died here. The people that choose to make this their living and their home and their life. They are servant leaders. They persevere through so much, especially when rural towns, when we're forgotten, especially in Austin, when you're thinking about, money and, big corporations, and we are definitely forgotten. Most people in Texas don't know where the Panhandle is at. Most people in Texas don't know where Amarillo's at. So I think that quote not only embodies, I think just what I see of myself and the things that I have lived through, but I think it embodies the Panhandle for sure.
One last question. I tell everybody this is coming. Somebody's listening to this. They're watching what's going on and seeing some of the things we're seeing, want to act, don't know how to start. How would you advise them? How do you get started to take action?
I've had this question many times in thinking I'm not a politician. I'm a mom, a veteran wife, an educator, and this little girl who came to the United States with a big dream. I think definitely learning, really learning if what you want, just digging deeper into these issues, because that's a sure way to find how you can help. And again, I finish off with that quote, if not you, then who? And it could be anything, but you'll find when you start getting into these issues, how you can volunteer, how you can speak, how you can share. There's so many ways now to bring out great information and spread love, spread knowledge, and really advocate for the things that need advocating. So I guess that would be my ending thing is, if not you, then who? If you're not the one that's going to go in and really look deeper into these issues, nobody else will.
Well, Diana, I think you're a great example of that, particularly on the education front, seeing the things you saw, knowing that you could jump in and make a difference, and not only that front, but on these other fronts. So thank you for your example to us. And, anyone who's out there listening, look at that example, think about what matters to you, network, connect with people, and jump in. Sometimes opportunities present themselves, Diana, as they did for you. Thank you so much for joining the Speak USA podcast today. And I want to ask our guests, our listeners, our viewers, what did you learn about our democracy today? You can learn more at our website, speakusa.org. We invite you to get engaged in our mission, which is to learn, connect, give, and speak up. Please remember, go out, speak for the USA. Thank you again, Diane.
Thank you.